Tabron.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good, man.
Thanks for chatting with me today. I'm excited to basically just hang out with you.
Yeah. as is our want.
Yeah, it is funny how often we communicate, but we actually don't look at each other.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too. It's also funny how often we have dialogue, but kind of don't talk. Like we talk very like, it's like, oh yeah, what about that? Okay, that's cool. And it's very like we're trying to get something done or dash to a finish line of a deadline. But I do feel like and I don't think it's an illusion. It's not like I like have the illusion of keeping touch with you because I follow you on social media. But like, I think we actually do have a dialogue constantly by virtue of working together. And that is sort of like a kind of touchstone of keeping in contact with one another. But it would feel like I'd talk to you and had a like substantive, deep conversation with you about life and the world 3 days ago. But I haven't actually been in the room with you in a year. It
kind of makes me wonder what like people with like normal professions are like, because I feel like something that's amazing about making music is that we are in this like constant community. Like there's this, we're all doing our own things and we're all connected to our own things, but we're also always connected together. And and it's like our projects are this kind of like glue for what's really there, which is our friendship. And I think it's like something that I always think about how like music gives this to us, but other professions does like what other professions are like that, that like gives us these like beautiful, I mean, maybe this is like general humanity shit, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I just feel fortunate.
I'm accustomed to kind of like the cadence of some of my best friends I've made making music with them. But I see them once every album cycle when it's time to make another record,
Yeah.
And then like loosely hear about fun on tour. For those listening, tour was a thing that used to happen when musicians would play outside. But then you'd have these really intense, like it'd be an intense month of working together, and like there's no room for facade there. It's sort of like just bare it all and like talk about your deepest, darkest secrets, and they're like, all right, I'll see you guys in 18 months. And I wonder, I think also similarly, like what's it like for people with quote unquote normal jobs? But the other side of that is I think, wow, I'm probably so maladjusted to anything that would look like that. Like, I don't know that I could do it. Like the water cooler conversation, I don't know that I could do.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. We're just constantly making a record. So, and we learned pretty quickly that you should be mixing them. So it feels like we're never really out of communication, even if like the excuse for talking is the records we're making. We're just constantly making records.
But to me, that's where the dialogue. I mean, I think that's. I guess you could make it a sort of chicken or the egg thing. Is it like, do we get on so well because we've made music together, or is us making music together so easy or fruitful because there's some other commonalities that we're just more easily revealed by virtue of us all being creative professionals? And maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe it's not like an either or thing.
I think it's both. I think it's both. Yeah, I mean, and again, I just think it's like music has like reveals. It's both the context that we share, but it kind of like reveals, real like kinship. Because I feel like you could work really intensely with folks and not really feel a connection, and I think that's with you, not just because of your technical proficiency and your ears and like your musicality and your good looks, your sense of humor, not just those things.
Stop. Keep
up. But I know just like, and I know the guys feel the same, that there's definitely a sense of camaraderie that's that's deeper than just that we have made music together. Even as spiritual and as transcendent as that is. I feel like, we could, I feel like, but yeah, like I feel like I'm not sure that we would have discovered each other, if it weren't for music. So I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I consider friends that, like, if you remove music from the equation and just on paper, you probably couldn't find more different human beings that like I can just get in the room with, and it's just like there's a way that there's like not really a lot of room for artifice there. And that like you sort of are who you are once you start communicating without talking, which I think is a lot of music. Yeah, that's sort of who you are. It's pretty hard to fake that, Yeah. And yeah, there's quite a few people that I know that, like, man, like, I'm so grateful for this mystery of music, whatever this was that we discovered, that enabled me to just be in the room with this human, let alone the calamity of good fortune that means we're both alive at the same time and they weren't born in the 14th century or something. But, like, I think of that often because I've always felt like a bit of an outsider in my life and a bit of a, like, loner to a degree, but sort of I could, fall into different groups and, when you become socialized when you're in middle school and high school, whatever, but like never really like fell into a clique, I never really had a crowd. I never really had like a, and
I can relate to that.
In sort of, and in being able to like code switch really well, you can sort of, it's a good task to learn and a good skill set to have in the world, but you can also sort of lose focus of like, okay, but who am I? Because I'm code switching constantly to try and amend or serve a different code of conduct in this social gathering and this social, so on and so forth. And then music, and I was saying this the other day actually to a friend of mine, like music was always this thing that was like simultaneously the hardest thing I've ever done and the most natural. and it's also, as you know, it's like, cool, I'm going to embark upon trying to become a master of something that no one has mastered. And there are masters, but I think like it's sort of, if you do it right, the end of your run on this plane of existence, you'll still be trying to get better at it.
Yeah, and the nature of the gig is it's also your own path no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that can lend itself to being, maybe it's a lonelier path. I mean, I think that the path to trying to be great at anything is a lonely path because of the sacrifice that one has to make and all the things that you have to get right in your head about, like, cool, what am I willing to give up for this? Especially this abstraction of a thing.
Yeah, and maybe that's actually a good segue because technically we're supposed to be talking about technology.
Yeah, let's hit it. We've been talking about technology.
Well, actually we have, you're right. But yeah, so like for you, I actually don't really know anything about you growing up. Like, what was your original connection to, well, I guess I'll say music. What was your original connection to music?
I mean, I would say, my family was a musical household, although there were no professional musicians in it. And my parents were music fans. They're a bit older. And like, I always say, like, I was the only 4-year-old that knew all the lyrics to all the Sam Cooke songs because my dad would listen to that in the car all the time. Like Fanny All-Star's salsa records that my mom would listen to, and I think thus I sort of started at looking at music as this thing that brought pleasure and fun, and I didn't really see it professionalized. And I think that's it would have been nice if my uncle was Quincy Jones, if I wanted to be a producer, sure, in some ways, but I think also it gave me the sort of underpinnings of like, this is just something that brings people joy.
Yeah,
And like,
yeah.
and look at how crazy it is. Like I remember sitting in the car, like, and when you listen to the radio, I remember thinking like, wow, like there's millions of other people listening to this song right now, probably singing along to it, to a guy who wrote this thing who's not even around anymore. I remember like having that thought at an early age. And
it's interesting. The way you're describing this is telling, because I often default when someone talks to me about my beginning in music. I often default errantly, actually, to talking about piano lessons. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's not my first experience with music, right? Mm-hmm. At some point, my music training like joined forces with my love for music as a listener and my experience as a listener. But that preceded my, like, you know, becoming a musician, you know, path. Whereas it's cool to hear you. I'm like kind of checking myself hearing you answer this question, you know. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I also like never have had a music lesson before
Yeah.
or anything. Like I can putz around on most instruments.
Yeah, but you could have easily
like,
started answering the question like by saying like, you know, oh well, like I got my first like computer at blah blah blah, or like you know, you could have started the question like that, or like my cousin had a drum kit and like, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think another influence to me was my grandfather lived with us my whole life until he died in 2001. And so like my father's father, and he would sing these blues songs to himself in the kitchen while he was cooking. And I have such a fond memory of that because like couldn't tell you what the songs were. And would not necessarily call his falsetto impeccable, but it's endearing. And like, and I also remember thinking like, wow, like his grandmother was born a slave, and there's probably songs that he's singing that he heard her sing and her mother's mother sing, you know, and I'm just like, the multi-layered valence of all of that was never lost on me. And I think I was fortunate, like as I said, my parents were a bit older than people's parents were who were my age, and I think I was lucky to have elders in the house, like my grandfather.
Yeah.
And spend a lot of time with people that are older than you who just have lived life and have this kind of experiential way of looking at things through a different timeline. Because you're 7, and so a year is 1/7 of your life. But what's 1/7 of someone's life who's 80 years old?
We've talked about this before. Yeah.
And so I think also, you know, I think broadly construed, man, like I was just thinking about this morning, actually, like, and you know this because you're a father, like we're born listeners. I think that like when, of course there's touch and sight and smell when you're a baby, but well before your vocal cords have even developed the ability to produce speech, let alone your brain is actually solidified in a way that you can actually articulate a thought, you're listening. And through mimesis, that's when you get like, you know, the first words, but like, I think something happens in most people, like once speech becomes a thing, that sort of becomes more important than listening in society. I think very easily it's like the talking becomes more of a thing than the listening. I think that for some reason it's common for children to get acculturated out of doing all the listening that they do as babies.
Wow. Yeah.
And
I see this happening right now with my son, actually, where it's really a flip switch where he's much more comfortable speaking than, maybe he just takes after his dad. he's much more comfortable speaking than he is like listening. Like he'll like really focus in on speaking, but he won't like super focus in on listening, you know?
Yeah. I think also I had to, it could be the sort of loner thing and sort of growing up in the way that I did, but I think I had to do a lot of listening. Maybe a bit more than the typical kid growing up. Right.
So you were an only child?
Well, I have 3 older half brothers, so 2 from my mom's first marriage and 1 from my dad's, but they were quite a bit older. I think there's 16 years between me and the next youngest. So they were all out of the house. Yeah, they were all out of the house by the time I came along. So ostensibly an only child, spent a lot of time alone, had a lot of like things that I had to sort of work out on my own
Yeah.
that required listening.
Right.
In the sort of philosophical sense and in the literal, just like,
Yeah.
you're gonna just chill.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
But
So
I think
then
that also one thing about technology that I would say, because I think this sort of bears on my perspective to technology. Something I always say is that language is a technology. You know, like language is one of the first technologies that humans discovered. You know,
Yeah.
And as a approximation of thought, you know, there's the whole sort of Platonic sense of like, okay, the thing that I'm saying is never really 100% what I'm thinking, but we're trying to get close to it and close to it and close to it.
Wow,
so
there's a good
I
parallel
like to,
there to mixing, right?
yeah.
Jeez.
I mean, I like to think of language as a technology because then you're thinking of technology as an enabler. That's all I think of technology as. Like I'm sitting in a room full of a bunch of esoteric gear, and I know all the stuff, and I'm a nerd, and I like to take it apart and do all these things, and but it is to serve an end.
Yeah, right.
And such is the same thing with when you and I are talking about music. Like that's why when I called you the other day about the next single, I'm like, I just wanted to hear you talk about it.
Yeah,
I wanted to hear the language that you were using.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
you know, like
that's
you could be
something I
talking
really-
about a thing that I don't even understand what it is, but the fact that you're mentioning it means it's important.
Yeah, that's something I really appreciate about working with you is that you do understand the difference between your tools and the music. You understand the difference between the act of mixing and the you know the correlation between the act of mixing and of telling and storytelling, of conveyance. You know, I think that's that like elusive thing that, in my opinion, really, especially when you're so like you said, you're surrounded by your gear and like all these tokens of your accomplishments, right? As an engineer, and as someone who's devoted your life to making audio, like when you get that, you know, Fairchild, like that's like a token of your accomplishment, right? And it's there validating your existence, and all of your efforts, right? Then you can easily substitute it for the thing that you really are doing. And I think that's one of the things that's so true across the whole spectrum of making music that uses technology, and really all music. To your point with the voice box, you know, all music actually requires technology. But I think, you know, for me, I'm actually, people always kind of like think that because I make music, like electronic music, quote unquote, that I have tons of gear. And I have no gear, and I really have. I shouldn't say no gear because there really is such thing as no gear, but I have very. I think that was my a little bit of my privilege, just eking out there. I apologize. I have very little gear, and it's something that I'm actually like. It's like a personal challenge to have as little equipment as possible, and it's proven to be logistically extremely important for me because I've moved around. I moved my life around so much, and I've made music in so many different places, and I'm just constantly like shipping like a monitor, like, you know, monitors and interface and you know, like hard drives and everything like all around. But
I love the other day when we were chatting, and I think I sent you an old photo of you messing around with a Juno, and you're like, "Yeah, but like I've never played a synth in my life." And I was like, in my first response, I think I was like, I didn't even type this. My first response was like, "The world is your synthesizer, of course not." Like you're gonna like sample something into your phone and chop it into something and make something no one's ever fucking heard of before. Why limit yourself to a synth?
I haven't owned a hardware synth since I was um, like 18 years old or something like that.
Mm.
Actually, in college, I played one. So like, yeah. So, but like, after college, I haven't had a hardware synth. I'm 41, so it's been a long time.
Yeah,
and it was a D20. It was a Roland D20.
Oh wow,
I love that thing. I love that thing so much. It was like basically a DX7 that was like it was like Roland. It was like Roland's answer to it, So
yeah.
An FM synth,
and a little bit easier to program than a DX.
Yeah, it was actually
DX
easier
is
to program,
like
and I
you
learned
use an
the hell
Excel
out of it.
spreadsheet to program that thing.
I'm remembering now that I actually it became so essential to because I was in a band and this synth I completely reprogrammed and made all these new patches and stuff. And it dawned on me one day that what happens when this thing breaks? I'm gonna lose all this programming. There was no like save it to a hard drive or so I bought a second one on eBay, and I lined them up. I think like this. And I just emulated all the 99 programs. I just took 2 days straight and just emulated all the programs so that I wouldn't lose my synth. And then I think that experience was formative because it was like, yo, I don't want to do this ever again in my life.
Yeah.
I don't want to be so dependent on a piece of hardware that
at that point it wasn't
that I can't cut and
you.
paste. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't enabling you. It wasn't enabling you. It was actually holding you back. And to be free of that, I think one thing that I realize is for some reason in pro audio, I think it happens probably because younger engineers coming up don't have access to gear, and that's a common lineage even today, even though a laptop has more power in it than they had to make most of early records. But so they think that once I put this piece of the puzzle in here, once I have the Fairchild or once I have the then that's, and I see it all the time with young engineers that I'm teaching, and they sit at my rig and they have all the plugins and they have all the stuff that they read in the magazines, and then they overdo it, of course, and use everything. I think it's easy to valorize gear. And I actually, that brings me to this question. Do you know what kind of piano Bill Evans played?
No.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
and I think most of the people that we admire, at least.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'd say most of the people that we admire, it's the tips of their fingers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if he wanted to use a Steinway, or he wanted to use a Mason Hamlin, or he wanted whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so what I don't understand is for some reason in the engineering community, it's always a thing this mix sounds great. Oh, what's that? A Fairchild? Yeah, I thought so. But never do you see a guy crossing the finish line at a marathon and being yeah, Nikes, I knew it. Had to be the Nikes.
Yeah. But I think part of that is because we, when we're obsessed like we are, we reward ourselves with tools to keep doing what we're doing. I haven't purchased an article of clothing in the last time I purchased an article of clothing was just for photo shoot. But before that, I literally wear blank t-shirts that cost $15, and I just don't spend money on because whenever I feel like I have some cash, I'm gonna put it into music, and it's if you're a gearhead, that's what you do. You reward yourself with gear, and so I think part of it is just a self-preservation mechanism where we have to spend so much money on something. If it's a piece of gear, you have to love it. You have to rely on it, in order to justify your own.
Of rewarding myself. I mean, I guess I do that.
Oh, you
sometimes.
do, bro.
But I don't know if I internalize it as rewarding. I remember early on a mentor of mine being don't buy anything if it's not going to help you make money. And that always stuck with me. And then that changes once manufacturers start giving you stuff for free, and you get that changes the whole ball game. I think I reward myself with instruments. That Moog was definitely a reward.
Right.
But
that's true. I see what you mean.
I know
or that
I do the
piano.
price tag.
Did you buy that piano, by the way? Yes.
The deal's in the. It's gonna happen. The deal. I mean,
It's gonna
possession's
happen,
9/10 of the law, so it's already sitting here. So I'm in a good bargaining position.
Oh
but
man,
yeah.
speaking of technology, dude, the piano.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's so, I mean, like, to me that just, I mean, I'm a pianist, and like I've fought the instrument for like most of my life now. And it always wins. But it's not, but it's like part of it is because it's that the technology is so perfect that it's just like something that I'm intimidated by the instrument. And I think part of the reason why is because it's such an incredible work of engineering. Like, the technology is so bafflingly, like, actually the way in which the technology serves the creative purpose is so, there's something so perfectly like aligned with it. That it's like just one of my favorite things in the world, on that level alone. It's also my least favorite thing in the world because I can't win. But
it's funny. It is. I thought of it in terms of just a genius of engineering. You know, piano is one of the hardest things to record, simply because it can be everything. It's a percussion instrument. It can reproduce almost every frequency, and you have to decide like the colors that you want to capture.
Yeah, what aspect of it? Because you have to choose. You can't. Yeah, you can't.
And it's dependent, similar to drums. I think it's dependent really heavily on the personality of the player.
Yeah.
Because
that's true.
There's just I mean, I've been fortunate. I mean, I've like sat next to Herbie while he's playing, you know, and Glassbird. I'm just like, wow, they're using their whole bodies with this instrument. Yeah. You know, and it's just like, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm doing the same voicings, but it ain't really popping the same way.
Yeah.
And you realize that there's
actually,
just
I think
like
one of the first times I went to Red Bull, when I sat down at the piano there, you're like, he's like, yeah, the last person that played that piano was Robert Glasper. And I was like, well, it's not gonna sound the same. and that's to your point. Like, it's about the union of the human and the technology.
I think there are also very few. Again, I mean, you know me and drums. It's probably my favorite thing to record, other than vocals. But it's one of the few instruments too where like it's. I mean, you tell me because you actually play, but like it pushes back at you. You know, like it like the amplification of it is you. You know, there's like it's like it's so immediate. Whether or not you're going to play it as a percussion instrument, or whether you're going to have it be this mellow thing, or whether like how hard you're going to pedal and how like indignant you're going to, you know, like are you going to flat finger it like Thelonious, you know, or are you going to do something nicer?
Right. Yes.
And it's sort of it seems to be this beast that you're just sort of like, just hold on, you know, like
and actually this is a perfect topic to discuss, which is that each instrument is each piano is different, right? And so, it pushes back to you on your fingers, on your feet, and also the frequencies that speak and where they speak and how they make your body resonate as you're there. And it kind of depends on like how much contact you have on the piano at one time, because you're also your fingers are not only absorbing the action, but they're also absorbing the resonances that are sympathetically communicated through the action and through the keys, right? There's this totally kind of immersive experience of sitting there and playing the piano that really you can't describe.
What drew you to piano when you started out?
Oh, just the family rule.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was like my family was not musical, is not musical. I'm like, even my extended family, I'm like totally the black sheep.
Join the club, man. We'll get jackets made. So I just did it because I had to. It was required. It was like more of a function of my like well-rounded Southern gentleman upbringing. You know what I mean? Ah, okay. But at what point did you realize like, oh, I actually have if not an outright gift for this, an inclination towards pursuing it?
Well, it wasn't my playing. It was writing. It was what the piano enabled me to do. Not what the piano, what I was supposed to do. Like, basically, I realized that I could make my own music. Mm-hmm. And that's when it came alive for me. You know, it was like the act of recreating what others had done was endlessly frustrating to me. And I was never, and I still think this is true of me. I have trouble internalizing someone else's music and interpreting it, or internalizing it and like, you know, in the case of like European classical repertoire, for example, like I can adore it with my ear, but I can't do justice to it when it goes through the filter of my body. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure why. But I fell in love with music like really when it became about me. But really, I also think that as I started to play other pianos other than the one that like that I had at home, my mind just really started to open up, because I was playing that piano at home. I wasn't playing the piano, you know, and then I had Mr. Brown, my 6th grade music teacher. He had a disclavier, and
oh, cool.
He was the raddest dude. It's funny. I think he was my first. He was like one of my. I think he was one of my only black teachers in my entire education experience. Crazy. And his whole vibe was so distinct, and I was so captivated by this guy. He had this idea where he said, bring in a song, one of your favorite songs. I'm going to work with you on the disclavier. And he said this to everybody, each person, on the disclavier, to recreate, to learn, to take the song apart, learn its different parts, guitars, bass, keyboards, drums, and we're going to recreate them together on the disclavier and sequence it. Mm-hmm. So he taught us how you open up the guts of a song and then like make a new version of it for yourself. And I was just like, it was like totally. I mean, seriously,
you're allowed to do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it sounded like absolutely terrible and cheesy, but he would give me time on this thing. I'm totally just remembering this now. The first time I haven't remembered this in a long time. He kept it in a storage closet, like, you know, undercover, and it was like, you know, locked away. And I remember he actually gave me time with it. I had to do it in the closet though. I had to go into this storage, keep it in the storage closet, and he. Okay. Yeah, because it was like he didn't want it out like where the kids would like bang on it and stuff. Like I think this was his personal disclavier. I don't think. Got it. Yeah, I don't think it belonged to the school, so he kept it locked up. But he gave me.
And what age were you at this time?
6th grade. So what? Okay. How old are you in 6th grade? Somewhere between like
12,
5 and 20 years old. I don't really. And at the same time, my piano teacher was. My neighborhood piano teacher had totally run out of like things that she could help me with, basically, and she was handing me off to like a fancy professor at Wesleyan University. So I did this thing where I basically grew out of my music teacher in elementary school, and then I like upgraded really hardcore to I was basically going at 11 years old. I was basically going to college for music at Wesleyan. I grew up in Connecticut. I was in this this woman's like in her studio as a pianist, but at the same time, like on the other side of my brain, I was like starting to play in bands, and Mr. Brown was teaching me about like how to use a synth, and I was like starting to like write like rock kind of tunes or whatever, and use and this was like totally pre-computers, you know. I mean, like, dude, like, because I was born in '79, so like I mean, we had a computer at home. We started having, like, I think I got a computer at like 15, and it was like an early Mac, like an early, it's like a quad. No, we upgraded me for college to a Quadra 605.
Oh wow! What did you have? 428 megabytes of hard drive space.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was 256. I think it was 256 megabytes or something like that. And then I got a G3 in when I was a sophomore but blue and white G3 when I was a sophomore. Yeah, blue and white.
I have one of those babies too.
Dude, that thing rocked for like.
I say this all the time. I had a blue and white G3 with a Pro Tools Mix Plus before they had HD rig. That thing never crashed. I may have restarted it once in my life.
Yeah,
it's still more stable than this rig I have right now. I never had to restart on OS 9. Never restarted.
I made so much music on that thing, and like it was so reliable. 300 megahertz, 6 gigabyte internal hard drive.
Yeah, smoking.
It was amazing, and it actually wasn't loud. It wasn't until the G4 when they got really loud. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I had the mirror door ones that was loud.
Yeah, I had that too. Oh my gosh, I got it. I plugged it in, and I was like, "There's something wrong." I was like, I'm getting this for audio.
What's funny too is like the computers then, like it was like it almost had to be like, okay, this is an enabler of music. I'm not going to open up my email in another browser or like Netscape Navigator while I'm tracking, because like this computer can only do this thing. And now it's like the computers are like so powerful that you're like, you know, you're doing 17 other things on a thing, and like that's why like I have no iMessage on any of my rigs here. I don't have any distraction things. But
yeah,
in a way,
trouble with iMessage. Yeah.
In a way, the reason I asked you about this sort of your genesis with the piano is because I know a lot of pianists, but I think that it's always an instrument that I sort of romanticize as like, man, I wish I'd taken piano lessons as a kid. But you sort of stand out from that pack in a way that like you seem to be willfully irreverent, having learned the canon, having learned, you know, because I think there's an empiricism that comes with like common practice period music and learning the canons and doing all these things, right?
Yeah.
And then, but like, I feel like you sort of, maybe this is like an overcorrection and rebellion that came from youth or whatever, but like you seem to be similar to me with gear, but probably for different reason, like willing to just be completely irreverent about it. And like this thing is an instrument that is, I'm going to respond to, and it's going to respond to me. And I don't care. I just need to get this idea to come out. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a couple, that's cool. I mean, I appreciate that. To me, that's like, definitely a compliment. And I think partly that's because of that, what I was describing earlier, which is that on the terms presented to me, I flailed. Having the opportunity to both write and perform on the instrument on my own terms, that's when things came alive. And it's like I've always been able to perform far more difficult and complex things that I write on the instrument than I could ever like read on a page. And I think that's fairly common with folks, but it is also something that I've chosen, that I learned to embrace. I think when I was in music school, I remember so vividly one of my, I guess it was like one of my fellow students was in the adjacent practice room, and she was playing the Liszt sonata, B minor sonata. And it was like, and it's like one of the most like monstrous like pieces of piano writing in the European classical repertoire. And I was like, and I was just like feeling defeated because I was just like there trying to like play like relatively simple like Mozart or something, right? And then I just had this moment where I was like, you know what? My guess is she can't do this. And then I just, out of my head, played something, grooved super hard, got really wild, nothing planned in advance, made that instrument, turn into like a bunch of sparkling, jagged pieces of, glass and wind and just like and then I realized like I just like have this such vivid memory, and I was like, I'm not going to mourn the musician I'm not. I'm going to celebrate the musician I am.
Yeah. And I think
and
also like, go ahead.
Yeah, and I feel like I try to take that into everything. Like the piano for me now is a secondary instrument. Like the studio is my instrument. It's like such a cheesy, geeky, like electronic music guy thing to say, but the studio is my instrument. It's like the piano is a secondary function of my music making for sure.
Yeah, I think that I might be like romanticizing the genesis of Ryan Lott in the closet with this clavier, but I think like I would hazard to say that formative moment also was like, oh, I can hear myself without playing at the same time, and now I'm dealing with sound on sound.
Yes.
And now I'm composing in a layered way, and it's just like there's
and then
infinite possibilities here.
Yes, and then I think my parents must have picked up on the fact that I was freaking out about this clavier, because then like that Christmas they got me that D20, which was like that was my first sequencer, and that's where I learned to like customize my sounds and make my beats and basses and synths and like and then like I guess it could ping pong. I can't remember how it would.
You mean
maybe
bounce
I just
down?
had 8 tracks. Yeah, like
it probably
maybe I just had.
Could.
I can't remember.
I don't remember. Yeah.
But anyway, there was a little disk drive, floppy disk drive. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Anyway,
I sort of started out not. I mean, I remember 2 really formative moments for me, and there wasn't anything as romantic as playing a piano in a closet, but I do remember being in my brother's car and Prince Kiss came on. And I was like, and he was always into music. He actually taught me how to use an MPC. And I was like, why does the drums sound, I couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. And I was like, the drums sound weird. What's that? Like, is something wrong with the radio? And because, Prince hardly used bass in his songs in that era.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, it's probably because there's no bass in the song. The engineer or the producer probably put a reverse reverb on the kick to like fill it out. And I was like, the who? What? There's another. Yeah. I just thought Prince just kind of went in and it was like 1, 2, 3, and then like there's just a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's another guy that's making a thing that is hyper real.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And that's a job, you say? And so that, I think I started out, my first like professionalism in music was starting out as a DJ. And I think I still have those kind of sensibilities with what I do now as a producer or a mixer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Make things kind of go together. And all you're doing as a DJ is managing energy. And I think that's all you're doing as a mixer, honestly.
Yeah.
And a producer, broadly construed. And then the second moment is when I was working at, this must have been Chung King with Tony Maserati. So early on, like after I'd been on a record label and like had just finished my first and probably only record in the band that was just me, I was like mixing that. I was like moonlighting at Tony's studio, mixing that. And in exchange for like assisting him for free during the day. And so he had 2 rooms. There was a green room. There was a bunch of rooms at Chung King, but he had the green room and the blue room. And I think, he was in green. We were hanging out. And I was just always like, just trying to be conscientious, assisting, whatever. And he's like, gets a text message from Will.i.am. And he's like, Will says he's going to be here in 2 hours. I guess I should start that mix down the hall. And I'm like, I was like, what? So he like runs down and I think they had a J in the blue room, an SSL. And I've still to this day never seen anybody. And this thing came in like okay put together, but it was a demo.
Yeah.
And I'm like watching this guy play his instrument. And
Right.
and it's like, and this isn't just like this is, let me just put a little sprinkle on top, it's done. Like faders were at 0 and dude was just like,
yeah,
it was so inspired what he was doing. And in 40 minutes, it sounds like that Where's the Love, Justin Timberlake. Like it sounded pretty much like that.
Yeah.
And I watched that, and then Tony was like, all right, I gotta go get some dinner. Will's gonna be here. He said he wants to chop out the bridge. Do you know how to chop out the sync automation on the SSL?
I remember you told me this story.
Yeah, I think I told you that. And I was just like, my rule at that time was to at all costs say yes, because I'd never gone to audio school.
I didn't know the full context of this story, though.
I'd never gone to audio school, and there's people that are staring at a phone in the lobby that went to 3 years of audio school and hate me because I just happened to get in somehow, right? And I'm just like, yeah, I got you. And he's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, no problem. So that to this day, you would never do it because you're just chopping in Pro Tools. But he had all the automation SMPTE striped out on the desk. To this day, like it probably would take me 20 minutes to half an hour to do that. It's pretty hard to like chop the automation on a downbeat in the bridge, whatever. It took me an hour. And just as I finished it, like I figured out how to, first thing I did was like, okay, let's look up under the S's in the manual, SMPTE. Let me figure out what that is. And so he walks in the room as I'm playing it down to check my edit, and thank God it was fine. And he was like, hey man, did you just finish that? It shouldn't have taken you that long. Did you mess up or something? And I was like, no, I was just just listening down. Like, watch out for that snare. That snare in the second verse changes a little bit, so just watch out. And he was like, yeah, okay. And he sits down. I sit on the couch, like frozen, and he like plays it down, tilts his head to the side, switches speakers, plays it down again, shrugs, and then just like keeps working. And like 30 seconds later, Will walks in, and then we're there till 5 a.m. finishing the song. And at the end, and like at no point was anybody like, you saved it. Look at what my assistant did. He's a genius.
Right,
like it was just like, I got to hang. And like, if I had fucked that up, like that would have been a wrap, and you'd be talking to somebody else right now probably. But on the way out that morning, I just remember like the reward was, hey man, what you doing tomorrow? And I'll be like, I don't know, rocking with you. And he's like, yeah, come on in. And then
yes.
like I remember on the train, and I lived in the middle of nowhere in Brooklyn. That on the train the whole time I was like, I want this feeling all the time. Like I want to be the like silent hero, all the time. And I've like chased that constantly. And that's when those are like two sort of formative moments that also like I think still shape me to this day of like, I look at my gear as like color palette things and whatever. And of course love technology. And I've always been that sort of geek who knew how to solder since he was 12. But at the end of the day, like, okay, I needed to figure out that this is to serve the thing that this guy's going to now, it's not just like chop out the bridge but it's so that like he can walk in and the thing's already done. And now we're just vibing and making this thing the best thing it can be. Yeah. So I try a lot to get the technology to be invisible, and to, similar to you, be irreverent to it. Because a lot of the times
that's right.
I didn't know how to use gear, so I would use it the wrong way and come up with some cool sounds. Or I would leave Chungking or Sony or Hit Factory with Tony and then go to my crappy little studio and be like, well, the snare sounds way different there than it does here.
You know what? And actually, and that brings me to a good, like, it brings me to one of the reasons why I think we work well together is that I never had any like formal training making music with a computer. I never had any audio engineering training at all. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of picked things up along the way and like, basically tried to use, each time I would get a tool, I would really try to figure out how to make it like sing. Rather than like how it's supposed to be used, more like, what can I do? What can I get out of this thing? And what I wind up doing a lot of times is coming to interesting creative results by really just playing and experimenting. And things that definitely there's a right way to do them. I often sort of arrive in that region of result, but having gotten there in a very different way. And I think when you get mixes from me, like rough mixes, where I send you my stems and now you're like, okay, what do I need to address? What do I need to embrace? How do I get inside production slash premix, you seem to have a good way to balance your knowledge of the way things should sound and like the way things should be done with the particular energy of where I've arrived at, handing at the point that I've handed things over to you. And because it's such a fine line, like we don't want to lose what's unique about like how I created this thing, or how and now in the case of the band, like how we create these sounds, like we don't want to lose that. But at the same time, things got to hit and things got to be, got to compete with the sort of the universe of music out there and the universe of sound out there. And I feel like we can always trust you to like know where to, like how to strike that balance and without compromising in either way. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that you are adept with your skills and you have you know how to use the tools the way they were designed to be used. And yet you don't have the bias. You don't have a bias toward that and against like kind of like more non-traditional approaches.
Yeah, I mean, reference mixes are, especially in today's era, super important because now they become like working masters, like because everyone's got the plugins and the things to kind of make things pretty much the way they're envisioning it. Now, I think there are situations where I can't remember there was one on volume 1 that I did where I just sort of put all the faders back to 0 and redid a thing. But that was not out of like my irreverence for what you were doing. It was like, oh, I know what he's doing here. And like, I want to try and do this way. And I think that there's always something useful in a reference mix, even if and yours always sound good, but like, even if they sound quote unquote bad, I think releasing yourself, I tell a lot of young engineers this, to release yourself from the ego of being like, huh, this rough mix sounds like crap, like, because they've been listening to it. And they like something about it. And you have to figure out, your job is to figure out what they like about it. And it's not to tell them what's wrong. It's to take, okay, the snare's 6 dB too loud. Yeah, but okay, it's exciting up there though, isn't it? Yeah. So how are you going to keep the same excitement and make sure it's going to sound good everywhere? That's your job. And and I think that like consistently, I learned this at an early age from people like Tony and Bob Power. Like as a mixer, there's a direct relationship to the how well you do your job and how little evidence there was that you did anything at all. Because I don't want to hear a mix. Like I think that's not. I don't want to hear something. I want to hear a song, and that's when I know I'm done. And I'm going to send it to you when I hear the song. And I've said this many times before. Like the best compliment anyone will ever tell me about a mix I did is, "Wow, that's a really great song." Because I don't want them to hear the mix. I want the song to be its best version of itself. And so for me to like go in and be, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. Or, ooh, that lyric is like, okay. And then like I need to find the technical correlation for this affect. And that's just what we deal in. We both do. And I think you and you position of having mixed your stuff before and like you're in the DNA of it. So like there's not something you're going to send me that's going to be like a mistake or a thing you haven't thought out, It's there
it's
for
gonna
a
be
reason.
Intentional.
And it's my job to be like, okay, word. Like, how do I make this thing? Without
betraying that tension, how do I pair my solutions with his intention to maximize the Yeah, and it's cool. I feel like you've also like in the recently with like even at the mastering stage when we've been working with Dave Kutch. I hear him also telling the story with his technology and his ears. He's even refining the story even further. And I think the common conception is like if there's one aspect of like start to finish music making and releasing, it's like it's mastering. The purely technical job is mastering, but it's actually not. That's a misconception, I think. Yeah. But it's a conception that I've been abandoning slowly as personally I've tried to master my own things using learning mastering tools and trying to compare like, and just like what I do with you, where I like compare my mixes to your mixes, because on Brighter Wounds, I mixed half that record, you mixed half that record, and I only mixed the instrumentals on Volume 1, but all the hard work you did on Volume 1. I'm telling the guys I gotta delay this call. We're supposed to be on a Son Lux call right now.
Conference them in. Let's go.
but dude, yeah, I know, right? Let's make it a party. But it's like comparing my mixes to your mixes, and then also like my attempts at mastering with his masters, or really anyone else's masters that are good. It's crazy how, like, we can even use the same tools, but ultimately it's so elusive, and it's so much more than, I guess, to wrap it up, it's so much more than the technology. It's like,
yeah, I think it goes back to just sort of an interesting. Just this conversation sort of reminding me of just how I even started mixing for you. I think maybe you remember, but I was like, I think maybe you had just started. We just booked you in to start recording Brighter Wounds, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, listening to the music, and completely sincere about this. I was like, I know this guy mixes all his own shit, and it sounds good, but I think I can contribute, and I think I should just tell him that, I didn't say anything about like, I've got this new compressor, man, and I think that but I feel like, and that paradigm, your willingness just as an individual and as a collective, as a band, to like, either if you're gonna, one thing that you guys are really good at is like, if you're gonna trust somebody, you're gonna trust them. You're not gonna micromanage it. It's like either you're gonna not trust them at all and not get them involved, and so I've always felt enabled by you guys. But I also think that like my paradigm has always been, okay, Ryan's not coming to me to really first and foremost do anything technically that he can't do. He mixes all of stuff before. So what am I bringing to the table? I need to bring something to the table, a perspective.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's why I think it works really well. And I think that I really appreciate our working relationship, because it's like, I always feel like I'm not just like the audio janitor doing something you don't feel like doing. I feel like, you're calling me because you want my perspective on this thing. And now this dialogue happens that's enabled by technology, but I'm like listening to this narrative of this reference mix, and I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay, cool. And then I just start, you should see it once we're in the room again, like the first half hour, I'm just kind of playing. Yeah. I don't know what the knobs are doing. I'm just like, I'm looking at color palette. I'm just mixing colors. I'm like, yeah. Okay. No, there's a sadness in the bridge here that I want. Okay, that's, and like. Yeah. And I feel enabled by that, just by virtue of your willingness to kind of give that over,
Yeah.
So I deeply appreciate that.
Yeah. But I think that's just a recognition of that what we are ultimately doing, as you said, is like, we're making music, we're making art, and we're doing, the technical always has to serve. We can't get, tied, tangled up in the technology of it, and like abandoning our, like, not only abandoning what it's like back to what you originally said, like going back to to being a listener, not even a maker. And that's what I think is hard for me, is I am so enamored with the making of music, start to finish. I'll sit there and mess with an EQ for hours. Like, even the technical stuff, I just like I can get wrapped up in so much. But I always have to remind myself, and it's so weird. I feel like I'm still in 101 territory with this, but I always have to remind myself to be a listener. And I definitely can say that, even though you're the one with all the gear, and the room and all the expertise, about really like mixing like professionally, you're having worked with you has been probably more than anything else the thing that has reminded me recently to be a listener. Because what happens is the mix comes back to me and suddenly I'm able to be a listener. It's like the weirdest, and I think I've tried to explain this to you before.
That means we're in a good place. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Exactly. No. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and you're kind of hearing me listen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And then I get your ears, and then I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Like you take my ears, and then we like do a thing, and then you give me back your ears, and I'm like, oh.
And that's the thing. I'm always chasing in my like you only get a chance to listen to something for the first time once, right?
Yeah.
And so like if you were to the untrained viewer, it kind of looks like I'm not really working because I'll do a half hour and then I'll take a break and
right. No, yeah.
You know, but like I'm trying to defamiliarize the familiar constantly. I'm trying to like get that like, ooh, I forgot about this part, and that's why I work in a way where I don't really solo a lot. I don't really loop things.
Oh, right, because you got to keep it fresh,
flowing, because I want to keep it fresh, and I want to think about the audience who doesn't care if this compressor is 60 years old or if it's a plug-in or if I mixed it on a Mackie in the bathroom. You know, like it doesn't matter. I think I want to keep that spark.
You do not mix with a Mackie in the bathroom.
Well, hey, man, you haven't sent me the rest of the files for Volume 2 yet, so let's see. If it's appropriate, I would require that trust from you.
Speaking of which, we're never going to finish Volume 2 unless I get off the phone. So
all right, fair enough.
Let's wrap this. Dude, thanks again for just hanging out. And it's obviously it's been an honor to work with you, but it's also kind of just like I love the fact that this was an excuse to just hang out for a little bit. So
yeah,
thanks for
likewise,
making
man.
time.
It was great.
Yeah,
thank you,
buddy.
All
I'll
right,
see you
care.
in like a matter of minutes on text.
I'm sure. Later.
Later.